It is my considered opinion, after a lot of careful observation and pattern recognition, that the works attributed to Moses are built on the same framework of the hero's journey that Joseph Campbell identified as well over 1,000 other global myths are structured upon. Let me say something that sounds incredibly bold, but I would not say it if I couldn't demonstrate it. Yeah, I can demonstrate this. That I'm gonna claim that there is something that is a personal inward-looking path that is nested inside of Greek mythology, Roman mythology, Hinduism, Judaism, Buddhism. The Emerald Tablets of Thoth have this in there, the teachings of that. I don't think that that is an accurate source, but what I'm saying is that somebody in history has been continually finding ways of reteaching this, nesting this in new things to carry for different people. They all sound different, don't they? They sound radically different. All of those sound like they are not the same thing. There's a way to look at them where you realize they are. You know how we look at all of the works from that era? If you study it or if you looked at a lot of things, you realize, well, there's some similarities there. There are videos out there how people claim that people are plagiarizing each other or stealing from each other, or there's an evolution of things or whatnot. And that's what it looks like. It really does. But I'm going to tell you something. Once I found this, what I realized is that there's one teaching in all of them, and they all sound similar. They're going to have similar things in them. But it depends on the carrier of the story. The outer looking teaching is the carrier. The myth, the religion, the hero's journey. Those are all carriers for this inner teaching, of an inner pathway. And it's the same pathway. I can show you how to find it. It is pattern recognition. There's a lot of patterns to it. And there's a process to looking at it. There's a process to reading it. It takes a lot of time to see it. It takes a lot of time to process it. It takes a lot of time to turn it inward into one's own mind. And that's how it has to work. It almost seems to me, as you learn this process of how to turn it inward, suddenly all of them open up. It doesn't matter what you read, but I can tell you that things like Lao Tzu's Taoism, Buddha's Dhammapada, Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, Sermon on the Plain, Gospel of Thomas, very short, compact verses, those are a certain kind of a vehicle. They're one kind of a structured way to carry that verse, but they're known to be short, kind of cryptic verses. You have to figure them out. But that's not the only way to teach this. It's also taught in big epic stories that play out in different ways. They change up analogous components in real life that play out inside of here that change the way the story sounds, but it plays out still in your psyche. Religions do the same thing. A myth is going to play on the human's sense of adventure. A religion kind of plays on the human's sense of fear and guilt. And we have a lot of that because of where we come from. So there's different vehicles that are containing this that have different effectiveness. But somebody in the background knows this. Now, I want to warn, though, against anything that sounds like, some sort of a mysterious nested sort of a thing, because that is exactly what is there. But at the same time, in kind of recent history with the Stoics, this was just being blurted out in plain language. Sadly, that's it. Yeah, there's nothing supernatural here. This is about how to heal your life now. That's what this teaching is. What is going to emerge once we fully make the transition from a supernatural to natural is that this is absolutely psychology. And the hell with the emotions, going for it. It's a tough path. That's why it's hidden in here. What I want to say up front here, too, is that Joseph Campbell's identification of the hero's journey, the 17-step process that I'm not going to go into here, what that basically is a template. Here's common things in the story that emerge. Somebody is selected. They somehow say, no, I don't want to go. Then they have to. They get supernatural help. It goes on like that. If you step back and look at the story, as much as they sound different, you realize, there are some things happening along the way here that are the same thing in all of the stories. And that's critical. That's the structure that he saw. If you are somewhat familiar with the works of Carl Jung and his ideas about the human, the conscious, the subconscious, and then the collective unconscious. That's an important part. And then as Joseph Campbell in his own mythological overview point is looking at how these are structured and also coming to realize that, yes, these are somehow component parts of the psyche that play out inside. And in my own lifetime, I found that because I had to do it from the inside. I didn't see it from an overview. I saw it from the perspective of somebody who came from an abusive home and was not going to be okay in life. I had to find some way to change my life. And what emerged is exactly this. It's a self-guided path. The teachings provide, in some cases, kind of interactive steps, depending on whose work you're with. Other ones kind of just refer to what you have to do. In a Greek myth, you might be told you have to slay a dragon. In a Jesus teaching, it might say you got to forgive your enemy. They're doing the same thing, but seeing that may not emerge until we get to the point where we do turn it inside and make those component parts of our psyche. And to see this, it's pattern recognition. The people that can't see it are the people that don't take time, or the people that have a vested commitment in something else that are going to deny looking at this. That's my experience at this point, that not very many people will look at it, but also that is going to emerge in the material. Not very many people even care about this. It is the bottom line reality that makes everything work and that makes all of those other religions experience things that they think, oh yeah, we are right. You see, I'm having this experience, while somebody else has the same experience and says, no, we are right because we are having that experience. When in all reality, they're all having the experience. We have to look inward for the reason why. And I can get us there. It's going to take a few videos. I want to go through this. I can't go straight to Genesis. It's complicated. It's a different vehicle. It has different layering in it. I want to sneak up on it. If you're already familiar with the hero's journey, just go look at the elements of it. You'll see it. You'll be able to see, the idea of you're Moses, if you're on the hero's journey, that you have to escape your past, you have to escape the prison of Pharaoh, you have to part the sea, you've got to go through that passageway, you're entering into the desert, the belly of the whale. All of those become relative. You'll see those component parts beginning to emerge in there. For people that don't see that, I'll get us there. This is fun. This is a puzzle, but it's not magic. It is not supernatural. It is demonstrable. Although I think to demonstrate it, you can only demonstrate it to somebody who is on the path, who has dropped their ego and is looking inward and is trying to make those changes. That is who it is demonstrable to. Academics can look at it and say, yes, I see how that works and I see how it's helping people improve. If they themselves don't have to, forgive their molester or something like that, like a lot of us have to do, then they will still see it, but maybe won't have it as much as an experiential understanding. And dollars to donuts at this point, that's all who's left watching this. All right, welcome aboard. We just did the selection process. I have to unpack a few more things as we get into going through the story. You'll see how it fits, but I have to get us to the parts where it fits. In antiquity, as they're teaching these stories, I think we probably have a good sense that they did not understand that there was a brain, a conscious, a subconscious. But I submit that even though it was pre-technology, that they were our intellectual equals. That they didn't know what we know, but they saw what we see. They experienced life. They continually talking about these component parts, but they will refer to it as, at various times, depending on who you're looking or who you're listening to. It might be a conscious and a soul, or a spirit, carnal mind, some other kind of background something there that they know is there. They're always referring to it. And I think we need to understand that as they're trying to heal a hurt spirit or a soul like that, how do you interact with that? Yeah, we got to change that up and say, this is the mind, this is the subconscious, this is the area where the memories are residing. What we have to do to heal is to go after what we hold that hurts. Bingo, right there. They couldn't say that, but that's what we need to do. And when we follow their work, we have to understand that those are the component parts. I've reverse engineered this, so I'm going to go to the end. We can infer this by looking at our own lives and leaving out anything supernatural and looking at the components. As we go through these stories and we make them a part of our psyche, they're going to fit in our conscious, in our subconscious, and in that unified field that Jung identified. That's the field where we can sense each other sometimes. Yeah, I got feelings, instincts. Sometimes things happen that are just so obscure that you go, I don't know, what is there? Something is. I don't know how to deal with it. It just pops up once in a while and it's there. That is the field that they saw as well, because that is going to emerge in these teachings. In fact, what is going to emerge is that the human, the way that the conscious and the subconscious work together, the way that we have experienced life, stored that life, that we become parts of an energy system that creates life to continue to flow through that field in accordance with the nature of what we're holding up here. And that in order to change the flow of the field, we have to change the nature of what is up here. That's what they're getting at. And that's why people are like, I'm not doing that. Yeah, it's a tough one. So as I move along, that's going to be a part of how this works. When those parts, when the analogs, and we start playing out the story, that's where it plays out. Think of where else you have to play inside if you're interacting with something. You can't interact with your heart or your soul. You can think about them. You can talk about them. But you can't interact with them. This is an interactive process. Okay, so as I go along, the next video I'm going to do, I'm going to take us through a Greek myth. I'm going to go ahead and do the search for the golden fleece. We'll be Jason and go through and look at the component parts along the way. Those 17 steps that Joseph Campbell identified were just common in all of them, but not every one contains all 17 steps. They're just, one might have 10 and another one, some that overlap and a variety. So there are a variety of ways that that is being looked at, but that is too nebulous. We can fine tune it a little bit more than that. We've got the capacity to get a higher degree of resolution. And a part of that has to do with me saying, there's no myth in this. It's all physical. It's all psychological. It is all natural. And suddenly, boom, we can interact with it and change our lives. Okay, think of it this way. Think of the hero's journey kind of like this. Think of a gaming platform, perhaps, and you're moving from one place to another. You start off and you have to figure out how to get started. You got to find things. You got to get keys. That's what we're doing here. We're finding things and getting keys. Then as we move along to the next step, we're going to start using those keys to interface with ourselves, the story with ourselves, to learn what we're supposed to do along the way. And then we have to use those keys to solve whatever it takes there to move on. Think of it that way, that it's a multi-step approach. That platform that we're going to be following is that hero's journey platform. However, at each step along the way, that's what I've got, those tools, how to fully integrate that into the human psyche and interact with it in a way that it affects the healing. Fair warning, it's all on you. This process works for the individual. It is not something somebody sits down and imposes upon you or anything like that. It's you take the path or you don't. Nobody else can do this. Once you get to this point, leadership's gone. You are the solo seeker. Yeah, that's the only way this works. So as we get into that, I will just reiterate how it is all going to work. But what I'm going to do in the next video, or in the next part of this video now, is I'm going to just go through a couple of examples, a couple of short examples. I'm going to pick something from Lao Tzu, from Buddha, and Jesus. 3 comparisons to show how they're teaching the same thing, despite the fact that they sound different. This is going to begin showing how that decoding process happens. These are the keys that we use at each stage along the way, this right here. And this is the part that makes it complex, because they can be really small or they can be really big, even though they're accomplishing the same thing. So we can navigate that. And as I move along and things come up, I'll just keep adding things in. There's a hierarchy structure. There's things like that that will become more evident as we begin putting the pieces in place. Like I said, it makes sense. It does. But you have to step back from it and see it and plug in all the pieces in the right place. And once you understand, too, that all of that plays out in the psyche, that kind of helps you understand where they go. Plus, there's 3 parts. That's it. Whatever that story goes, works in those 3 parts, or it can work in the interface between the physical world and that spiritual world. It can work with what you're facing right in front of you as you're making that transition in, or perhaps what your experience might be along the path sometimes that's letting you know that you're being successful or not, those sorts of things. But by and large, that's it. And that everything that, no matter what you read, none of it is plain language. Every lesson is nested. There might be plain language things in there. There might be elements in the story that place it in a local region. Yeah, that's how you would make a story. If you were creating a story, you would make it about your local region. That's their radio station. Ultimately, that's it. With the minds like that and time on their hands. Anyway, okay, let me get into now the next process. I'm going to start with a verse here from Lao Tzu and move on to one from Buddha and then Jesus. And let's just take a look at, let's look. Naming is the origin of all particular things. Lao Tzu, Old Master. All that we are is the result of what we have thought. Buddha, the Enlightened One. Do not judge. Jesus, the Christ. They all have titles that sound different, huh? They're comparable. They're spiritual twins, but we'll get there. Do they sound alike? If we look at them, honestly, if we go back to Lao Tzu, naming is the origin of all particular things. That doesn't even make sense, does it? Things were around long before we showed up. So, you can't make any sense out of that verse. All that we are is the result of what we have thought. From the Buddha, it's like, well, okay, that's getting kind of plain language almost, but it doesn't quite tell me everything I need to know. And then if we go to Jesus, we see, do not judge. We have to. We have to judge. We're not talking about judging people. You're talking about judging right, wrong, judging distance, judging morality. You cannot read this literally and say, okay, don't do this, and then try to put caveats on it to make it make sense to you. It's open. It's a spiritual verse. Do not judge. No caveats. How do these work? We turn them all into our psyche now and see what happens. Naming is the origin of all particular things. There's another layer not visible here. All of these teachings appear in the front of these masters' teachings. This represents the start of our life. When we start out, we have not assigned value to anything. Naming is the origin of all particular things. What we are naming in our psyche is our experience. We're assigning them their values, their shame, their hate, their judgments, their hatred, their love, their joy, their compassion. We assign all of those things to our psyche as we experience life and we judge them. And we do this kind of unchecked. That is where things get their origin for us in our lives when we name them. Buddha, all that we are is the result of what we have thought. Same thing, bring it inside. Where is this happening? We have stored all of our thinking in our subconscious. And what we are is now a product of all of that thinking. Doesn't mean that we're thinking it actively or currently. We thought it at one point in time and put it away and said, God, it's past, it's done. And if it is, it won't come around and haunt you. If it's a problem, it will continue to emerge. Anyway, all that we are is a result of what we have thought, you betcha. Then if we go to Jesus, do not judge, same thing. It's about a beginning of life. Do not judge your experiences. Be open-minded to things. And this, we have to be careful. We're looking at an entire body of work right here. This doesn't mean don't judge hurtful physical things or things like that. It means do not judge the experiences that you hold inside of you that create in you conditions that continue to play out in a derogatory manner. This is just one verse by itself, so it doesn't cover everything. But instantly, all three of these verses suddenly mean the same thing. Whatever you experience in life, you assign it its value, and it resides that way. And another important thing to look at with these verses at this moment right here is that every one of them, before we decoded them or when we were trying to read them at face value, they didn't make sense. They required caveats, or they weren't complete, or they didn't help very much, or they just sounded goofy. Once you do this and make those analogous parts to your psyche and the component parts of your psyche, suddenly they are 100% accurate and demonstrable and identical as well. They're different words to carry the same inner teaching. Okay, that right there are examples of as easy as it gets. From here on out, it only gets more layers and more depth to it. Watch this. We join spokes together in a wheel, but it is the center hole that makes the wagon move. Lao Tzu. If a man speaks or acts with an evil thought, pain follows him as the wheel follows the foot of the ox that draws the carriage. The Buddha. For with the judgment with which you judge others, it will be likewise judged unto you. Jesus. Okay, let's go back to Lao Tzu again. We join spokes together in a wheel, but it is the center hole that makes the wagon move. We're starting to pick up some analogs here, that we got a wheel, we got a center hole, we got a moving wagon. We got a couple of elements here that we need to fit into our psyche. The wagon moving represents our life, us moving along in life, our motion. The center hole is what makes the wagon move. The center hole is going to become the psyche. You can see that that is a part where we hold the axle. What is held inside of there is what determines the quality of the circle of the wheel. The spokes are there to help make the wheel. That doesn't matter. It's the center hole they're looking at. But we see something else that's happening. What does a wheel do? The wheel comes around and around. So what we're holding up in here creates conditions in our life for something to continue to cycle, and that determines the way we move through life. If a man speaks or acts with an evil thought, pain follows him as the wheel follows the foot of the ox that draws the carriage. Buddha, about the same time as Lao Tzu, but in a different region. But you see, this is a very similar sounding teaching. The man speaks or acts with an evil thought. Remember, that was something that we decided up here. Evil thought, I'm going to tell you right now, though, does not necessarily mean that you were evil. It might mean that you were a victim and you're holding shame, hatred, anger, something that is just derogatory. So we're holding on to something that is following around and around. It follows the foot of the ox that draws the carriage. So in this case, we see the same thing happening, though. The cycle, the wheel is coming around based on, he's making it like or as the wheel follows the foot. So that lets us know right there that the evil thought continues to come around and around. We can look at that without any more detail by just looking at our own lives and understanding that we might have some issues that we're trying to deal with. I get angry, I outburst, I have regrets later. I try to resolve issues, but something continues to happen, or maybe something happened that causes me to lash out against a certain kind of a people or something, some way, somehow. I'm holding baggage, and it continues to cycle around, and Buddha's teaching us that. We get to Jesus, for with the judgment with which you judge others, it will be likewise judged unto you. Is that one making sense? The judgment is the judgment that we placed up here. It was what we initially decided. Yeah, I'm ashamed. I hate you. All those things, and that gets put away and it gets left there. And what happens when enough time goes on in life, we realize it's acting out. It's an entity there. There is something going on. For with the judgment with which you judge others, we're not talking about other people. We're talking about others inside of us. Others becomes a component part of our psyche. It's not outside, it is inside. With how we judge the things inside of us, our life is going to continue to play out cyclically. You see all three of these based on the effect. That's how you find how they're similar. You play them through. You put them in your psyche, you see where they go, And it teaches you that the way that I judged life got stored away that way, and the way that I continue to leave it in place continues to act out. All three of these are teaching that right there. And it still gets deeper. I don't want to go into it farther here. I think that it's something that it's easier to grow as we move along. Yeah, there's a lot of parts to it, and I overdo it sometimes, and I think I bore people. And I think that this is something actually, no, I think this is just knowledge, that if you want this knowledge, you're going to want this knowledge. It looks to me like it has always been there. When you look at the structure, you go, oh my gosh, it's everywhere. Yeah, there wasn't a secret person someplace. There was all kinds of people that knew this and were putting it out there. Let me quickly grab a couple of examples from a completely different genre of storytelling. Let's go to Greek mythology. Sisyphus was punished to roll a boulder up a hill, but the boulder repeatedly rolls down. Just before it gets to the top, it comes back down, so he can never quite get it done. He can't resolve this. It's on his back. What we see is a cyclical behavior that you can't get off your back, and it is due to something that you're being punished for in this case. Sisyphus is a concept within us. Prometheus, also from Greek mythologies, punishment is having liver eaten out and it grows back to be eaten again. It's painful. And it grows back and it painfully gets eaten out again. The Greeks thought the liver was the seat of emotion. So here we have again a story where there is a structure. We need a repeated pain. What can you do to describe a repeated pain happening over and over again? That's what they're doing here, finding ways of trying to describe that, using analogs from their culture. See how it plays out? And everybody that thinks they're special, that's a part of the process. I got scolded recently by somebody who, I'm not going to look it up right now, but in the Tao Te Ching, one of the verses in here warns you against trying to figure it out, saying that you can't understand it, you can't analyze it. And I'm going to say this, that when you read things like this, every thing that is written in here, what is there, 70, 80, we have 82, 81, 81 verses in here. Every one of them cryptic, with one saying, you can't figure this out. What are you supposed to do with that? You know what the seeker's going to do? Pfft, give me that book. Don't figure it out. It's supposed to be figured out. And there is nobody above us back there. They're teaching us how to heal ourselves in physical ways, but they're creating it in vehicles that have supernatural elements because most humans prefer that. And the humans grow them into these big monstrous things that they weren't to begin with, the outward part. Anyway, yes, and what are we going to get to? I'm going to go through this. The next video is going to be I'm going to become Jason, and we're going to gather up our Argonauts, and we're going to go in search of the Golden Fleece. What I'm going to do in that adventure is play it out as I believe it was intended. I'm going to play it out inside of my psyche and correlate the events along the way with what I had to experience in life, so you can see how I'm making that connection. That is, I think, how this works. You're not supposed to, I don't think you're supposed to tell people how to do it. You show people what you did and they go, oh, okay, I get that. I believe that's how this kind of works. Or you find it on your own and experiment and grab bits and pieces here and there. This is available independently. There's nothing magical here. As far as it being around the world culturally, yeah, anybody that sits and looks and watches life unfold and determines cause and effect is going to see this. The way you think and the way you hurt creates a screwed up life for you. The people that don't hurt don't have screwed up lives. Things work better for them. The people who have screwed up lives but figure out a way to resolve those issues have better lives. Yeah, that's obvious to anybody who sits and watches life. And then they pass that along and people go, yeah, I'm not fessing up to any of that stuff. No, I'm not letting that out. It's too shameful. It hurts. So the story doesn't go, but here it is. This is it. Okay, I think that I covered enough here to get it set up. Again, they're all nesting the same thing. There is a process. You're chosen, you're selected, you leave your past, you enter into the subconscious, you begin dealing with issues. All of that becomes parts of these stories. And then what we just did right here, as far as making those analogs that as parts of our psyche and realizing that that is what they are doing, that we can begin to understand what they're teaching us. And ultimately, they're all teaching us the same thing. I hope that was enough to get us started. If you're interested in this and you have any questions about anything I said, or if anything didn't make sense, sometimes I don't explain myself. It just makes sense to me and I say something and somebody later might wonder, yeah, I mean, we all do that. So I don't have a sounding board. Please go ahead and feel free to add comments. And I will start working on getting ready for taking a hero's journey in the next video. I think that's going to be fun. I hope all of this makes sense. I know that I am working towards getting to the works of Moses, and I didn't want to jump right on that and have it sound so foreign. There's some things going on here that it's easier to see them and have them work out in certain areas. Judaism got thick, really thick, but it's there. And yeah, I think it's going to take another video or two, but I'm anxious to get there. It's going to be fun. Till then, love one another, and I'll see you in the next video.